The red alert siren wailed through the command center. Admiral Lori Wright rubbed her tired eyes and looked at the main screen. Another Illyrian colony had fallen. This time, it was Theta 9, their largest and most important outpost. "How many survivors?" she asked, her voice steady despite the weight in her chest. "Less than 200, replied Commander Ben Ford, his blue skin pale with exhaustion. "The Vorex hit hard and fast. Our defenses barely slowed them down." Lori nodded and turned to face the rest of the command staff. For 17 years, the Gardanian Alliance had held the line against the Vorex dominion. 17 years of blood, sacrifice, and slow retreat. The Alliance, formed by the swift Illyrians, the strategic Targans like herself, and the technological Nephthali, was reaching its breaking point. "We need to call an emergency council meeting," she said. "This changes everything." 6 hours later, representatives from all three species gathered in the war room of Gardanian Station. The mood was grim. "Our fuel reserves are at 20%, said Nephthali engineer Joe Martinez, his six-fingered hands moving across the datapad. "Food supplies for the refugee camps will last another month at most, and we've lost contact with 3 more outposts in the sickness sector." Grand Minister Peter Clark, the elderly Illyrian leader, shook his head. "The Tarjan Fourth Fleet was destroyed last week. The Nephthali shipyards on Vesta Prime are under attack. Now Theta 9 is gone. We must face the truth. We are losing this war." The room fell silent. For nearly 2 decades, they had fought the Vorex, a relentless enemy that consumed everything in its path. Planets stripped bare. Populations vanished. No negotiations, no prisoners, no mercy. "Then we must surrender," said Defense Minister Amy Young, her voice breaking. "Surrender is death," replied General Rick Taylor, slamming his fist on the table. "The Vorex don't take prisoners. They don't sign peace treaties. They consume. They destroy. They move on." Lori stood up slowly. "There may be another option." All eyes turned to her. "Speak freely, Admiral," said Grand Minister Clark. "We've exhausted conventional strategies, but there's an old legend among my people, a species called humans from a planet called Earth, warriors of great skill and unpredictable tactics. Our ancient records suggest they helped us once before, thousands of years ago, then disappeared." Scientist Galen Mertoff, a senior Nephthali researcher, nodded excitedly. "Yes, our archives mention them too. They were isolated by the great radiation storms during the Silent Years. We lost contact with their sector ages ago." Defense Minister Young rolled her eyes. "We're basing our hopes on fairy tales now. What's next?" "Magic spells." "It's not a fairy tale," said Galen. "I've been studying the old star charts. Earth is located beyond the Perseus radiation belt. No ship has crossed that barrier in centuries, but theoretically." The station's alarm cut him off. Commander Ford rushed to the console. "Long-range sensors have detected unknown vessels approaching Alliance space," he announced. "Configuration matches nothing in our database." "Vorex?" asked General Taylor, reaching for his weapon. "No," Ford replied, shaking his head. "The energy signatures are completely different, more advanced, and they're broadcasting a message on all frequencies." "Put it through," ordered Lori. Static filled the room, then cleared to reveal a voice speaking in an unfamiliar language. The universal translator worked to decode it. "Gardanian Alliance, this is Captain Jack Miller of the Earth vessel Dauntless. We've received your distress signals. We're here to help." The room erupted in shocked whispers. Lori felt a chill run down her spine. The humans were real, and they had somehow crossed the impassable radiation barrier. "Bring the ships on screen," she commanded. The display flickered to life, showing 3 massive vessels unlike anything the Alliance had ever seen. Their hulls gleamed silver against the blackness of space, powerful and sleek. As the Alliance leaders watched in stunned silence, more ships appeared behind the first 3, dozens of them. forming a fleet larger than anything the Alliance could now field. After 17 years of retreat, defeat, and despair, Lori felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. Captain Jack Miller stood on the bridge of the Dauntless, watching the stars. He was a tall man with short brown hair and deep lines around his eyes. His blue uniform was crisp and neat. 20 years of military service had taught him patience, but today his heart beat faster than normal. "Are they responding to our message, Lisa?" he asked. Communications Officer Lisa Carter adjusted her headset. Her fingers moved quickly over the control panel. "Yes, Captain. They're sending coordinates for a meeting. They sound surprised to hear from us." Jack nodded. They would be. Earth has been cut off for centuries. The cosmic radiation storms of the silent years had isolated Earth from the rest of the galaxy. While humans developed their technology and expanded through their solar system, they had no idea that a terrible war raged beyond the radiation belt. Only when they finally broke through the barrier did they discover the truth. "The Alliance ships are approaching, sir," said First Officer Paul Grant. They looked damaged. Battle scars everywhere. Jack watched as 3 small ships came into view. Once, they might have been beautiful. Now they were patched together with mismatched parts, their hulls dented and burned. "This is why we're here," Jack said quietly. "Look at what they've endured." For years, Earth had picked up faint distress signals from beyond the radiation belt. At first, they couldn't understand the messages, but slowly they decoded them and learned about the Gardanian Alliance and their desperate fight against the Vorex. "Captain, I've established visual contact," Lisa said, putting them on screen now. The main screen flickered to life. 3 alien faces appeared. Jack recognized them from the old records. A blue-skinned Tarjan female with silver eyes, a slender Illyrian male with leaf-like patterns on his face, and a 6-fingered Nephthali with a high forehead. "I am Admiral Lori Wright of the Gardanian Alliance," said the Tarjan. "Your arrival is unexpected." Jack stepped forward. "I understand, Admiral. I'm Captain Jack Miller of Earth. We've been monitoring your war for some time now." The aliens exchanged looks of surprise. "That's impossible," said the Illyrian. "The radiation belt. We broke through it 5 years ago," Jack explained. "Since then, we've been gathering intelligence on the Vorex, learning their weaknesses, preparing." "Preparing for what?" asked Admiral Wright. "To help you," Jack replied simply. "Humanity has a debt to pay. Long ago, your people, especially the Nephthali, visited Earth. They guided us, taught us, and then disappeared. We found records of their visit in our ancient ruins." The Nephthali leaned forward, his eyes wide. "You speak of the Scout mission, but that was thousands of years ago." Jack nodded. "The Scouts crashed on our planet. They lived among us, shared their knowledge, and eventually died there. They became part of our legends. Now we have a chance to honor that ancient bond." Admiral Wright looked skeptical. "Why would you risk yourselves for strangers? What do you gain?" "We're not strangers," Jack said firmly. "We're distant cousins, and we've brought 20 ships with us, with more following." 20 ships won't turn the tide of this war," said the Illyrian bitterly. "The Vorex have thousands." Jack smiled slightly. "Our ships are different. We'd like to demonstrate, if you'll allow us." Before the Admiral could respond, alarms blared on both ships. "Vorex vessels detected," shouted Commander Ford from the Alliance side. 3 battle groups heading straight for us." Jack turned to his weapons officer, Steve Rogers. "Looks like we'll get to show them sooner than expected." Battle stations. The crew of the Dauntless moved with smooth efficiency. Jack returned his attention to the screen. "Admiral Wright, please move your ships behind ours. We'll handle this." The Admiral looked doubtful but gave the order. As the Alliance ships retreated to a safe distance, the Dauntless and its sister ships, Valiant and Intrepid, moved forward to meet the incoming Vorex fleet. For the first time in 17 years, The Alliance was not alone. The Vorex ships came in fast, their black hulls reflecting no light. They moved like a swarm of insects, dozens of small fighters surrounding 3 larger command vessels. "Target the lead ship," Jack ordered calmly. Weapons Officer Steve Rogers nodded. "Targeting systems locked, Captain." On the Alliance ships, Admiral Wright and her crew watched in tense silence. They had seen this before, the Vorex attack pattern that had destroyed countless Alliance vessels. "The humans don't stand a chance," muttered Commander Ford. "Their ships will be torn apart." Admiral Wright wasn't so sure. "Wait and see," she said quietly. On the Dauntless, Jack gave the order. "Fire main cannons." Bright blue energy beams shot from the human ships, but instead of hitting the Vorex vessels directly, the beams split into hundreds of smaller bolts that targeted the small fighters first. In seconds, half the Vorex swarm was gone. The Alliance crew gasped. "Impossible," said Ford. "Our weapons can't do that." The remaining Vorex ships changed formation, moving to protect their command vessels. This was new. The Vorex never showed defensive behavior before. "They're adapting," Jack noted. "Lisa, open a channel to the Valiant and Intrepid." Lisa nodded. "Channel open." "Sir." "Execute pattern Delta," Jack commanded. The 3 human ships suddenly split apart, moving in different directions. The Vorex seemed confused, dividing their forces to chase all 3. That was their mistake. The human ships activated strange devices that sent out waves of energy. When the waves hit the Vorex ships, their systems failed. They drifted helplessly in space. "What did they do?" asked Admiral Wright, leaning forward in her chair. "Some kind of energy weapon we've never seen," replied her science officer. Within minutes, the battle was over. The Vorex ships retreated, something the Alliance had rarely seen in 17 years of war. 2 hours later, Grand Minister Peter Clark hosted a meeting on the Alliance station. The room was filled with both Alliance leaders and the human delegation. Jack brought his team. Military strategist Kevin Reyes, a sturdy man with a quiet voice. Xenobiologist Susan Walsh, whose sharp eyes missed nothing, and engineer Kathy Winters, who kept checking readings on her small device. Grand Minister Clark spoke first. "What we saw today was remarkable. But why help us now? Why not years ago?" Kevin Reyes stepped forward. "We couldn't cross the radiation belt until recently, and we needed time to study the enemy." "Study them how?" asked Defense Minister Amy Young, still suspicious of the humans. Susan Walsh answered. "The Vorex send communication signals we could detect even through the radiation. We analyzed these signals for years. We learned their patterns, their weaknesses, and their strengths," added Jack. "We know they're a hive mind. Cut off the command ships, and the smaller vessels become confused." Alliance Intelligence Officer Dennis Cooper had been silent until now. He stood up slowly. "Our scans of your ships showed technology far beyond anything the Alliance or Vorex possess. You could be more dangerous than they are." The room grew tense. Jack looked at Cooper with understanding in his eyes. "You've been fighting for survival for 17 years. Trust doesn't come easily, I know." He turned to address everyone. "We don't ask for your trust right away. Judge us by our actions. We're offering to help retrofit your ships with our shield technology as a first step." Engineer Winters opened a case she had brought. Inside was a small device glowing with blue light. "This shield generator can be adapted to any Alliance ship," she explained. "It will triple your defensive capabilities." Admiral Wright studied the device. "And what do you want in return?" "A chance to fight alongside you," Jack replied. "The Vorex aren't just your enemy. If they consume this part of the galaxy, Earth will eventually fall too. We're fighting for our future as much as yours." Grand Minister Clark looked at the human delegation thoughtfully. "The Alliance Council will need to vote," he said, "but I believe we would be fools to refuse your help." As the meeting continued, no one noticed Dennis Cooper slip away quietly. He had his own investigation to conduct. These humans were hiding something. He was sure of it. 3 days passed. Human engineers worked side by side with Alliance technicians to install shield generators on their ships. The work was moving quickly, but not everyone was happy about it. They touch everything. They ask too many questions, complained Chief Engineer Stan Boyd of the Alliance cruiser Starfire. How do we know they aren't placing spy devices in our systems? Military Commander Grace Peterson of the human team overheard him. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and a straight back. 25 years in Earth's space forces had taught her to face problems directly. "We're asking questions because we need to understand your systems to help you," she said calmly. "But I understand your concerns. You can check our work anytime." Boyd looked embarrassed, but nodded. On the command deck of the Alliance station, Admiral Wright met with Jack Miller and Dennis Cooper. "Our long-range scouts report increased Vorex activity," she said, pointing to a star map. "They're gathering a massive fleet here, near the Cygnus crossroads." Jack studied the map. "They're planning something big, probably an attack on your core worlds." Cooper's eyes narrowed. "How can you be so sure? You've never fought them before." "We've studied them for years," Jack reminded him. "Their patterns are clear when you have the right perspective." Cooper was about to argue when alarms blared throughout the station. Commander Ford rushed in. Vorex ships just jumped into the system, at least 50 vessels, including 2 dreadnoughts. Admiral Wright's face paled. "They've never sent dreadnoughts here before. We don't have enough ships ready." "We do," Jack interrupted. He touched his communication device. "Miller to all Earth vessels. Battle stations. Implement Formation Omega." Within minutes, the human fleet moved into position around the Alliance station. The upgraded Alliance ships joined them, forming a protective barrier. The Vorex fleet approached slowly, more cautious after their previous defeat. "They've adapted their approach," observed Grace Peterson, now on the bridge of the Dauntless. "They're learning." Jack nodded. "That's what makes them dangerous." "Kevin, what's your analysis?" Kevin Reyes studied the enemy formation. "They've positioned their fighters to counter our split-beam weapons, but they've left their flank exposed." "Then that's where we hit them," Jack decided. "Grace, take the Valiant and 3 Alliance ships. Circle around and attack from Sector 7. The battle that followed was unlike anything the Alliance had seen in 17 years of war. The human ships moved with unpredictable patterns, never staying in one place long enough for the Vorex to target them effectively. The upgraded Alliance ships followed their lead, their new shields absorbing damage that would have destroyed them before. Commander Ford watched in amazement as Grace Peterson's small group tore through the Vorex flank, causing chaos in their formation. "How are they doing this?" he asked Admiral Wright. "We've been fighting the Vorex for years and never found such weaknesses." "It's not just their technology," Wright realized. "It's how they think. Look at how they change tactics constantly. The Vorex can't predict them." After 2 hours of intense fighting, the Vorex retreated again, leaving behind the wreckage of half their fleet. The Alliance had lost only 3 ships, a miracle compared to their usual casualties. Later, in the medical bay, Alliance Commander Alan Hayes watched human and Alliance medical teams treating the wounded. He approached Grace Peterson. "You fight like nothing I've ever seen," he said. "It's almost joyful." Grace looked thoughtful, not joyful, determined. "On Earth, we have a saying. The best defense is a good offense. We don't just react to threats. We take the initiative." "It's working," Hayes admitted. "But I wonder what happens after we win this war. Will humans be content to be our allies, or will you want more?" Grace met his gaze steadily. "That's a fair question. I don't have the answer. But right now, we have a common enemy." Hayes nodded slowly. "For now, that's enough." On the other side of the station, Dennis Cooper watched the humans through security cameras. His investigation had found nothing suspicious, which made him even more uneasy. No one was this perfect. The humans were hiding something, and he was determined to find out what. 1 week after the battle, The combined Human Alliance fleet prepared for something they hadn't considered possible before, taking back Theta 9, the fallen Illyrian colony. Field Commander Jason Russell stood in the briefing room, pointing at the holographic map of Theta 9. He was younger than most of the other human officers, with dark skin and keen eyes that missed nothing. The Vorex have 3 main bases on the planet's surface, he explained to the mixed group of human and Alliance soldiers. Our ships will handle the orbital defenses while ground teams take out these bases. An Alliance soldier raised his hand. We've tried ground assaults before. The Vorex overwhelm us with numbers. Jason nodded. That's why we won't face them head-on. We'll use small, fast teams. Strike hard, then move before they can respond. Admiral Wright and Jack Miller watched from the back of the room. Your people seem very confident, Wright said quietly. Jack's expression was serious. We respect the enemy, but fear makes soldiers hesitate. Hesitation gets them killed. 12 hours later, 20 transport ships entered Theta 9's atmosphere, protected by the fleet above. Jason Russell led the first team to land, a mixed group of human Marines and Alliance soldiers. The red sky of Theta 9 was filled with smoke. Once beautiful cities now lay in ruins. The air smelled wrong, too sweet, like rotting fruit. Stay alert, Jason warned as they moved through the empty streets. Something doesn't feel right. Alliance Sergeant Roy Palmer scanned the buildings with his device. No life signs, but there's strange energy readings everywhere. They turned a corner and froze. The road ahead was covered with a thick, pulsing material that looked like black veins spreading across the ground and up the buildings. What is that? Whispered a human soldier. Vorex biomatter, Palmer replied, his voice tight with fear. They're not just occupying the planet. They're changing it. Jason studied the strange growth. We need a sample. Susan needs to see this. A young soldier stepped forward carefully, cutting a small piece with a special tool. As soon as the sample was contained, they moved on. At the first Vorex base, they found something even more disturbing. The structure wasn't built, it was grown. The entire base was a massive organic construct, pulsing with the same dark veins they had seen in the city. Setting charges, reported the demolition expert as the team secured the perimeter. Suddenly, Palmer's scanner beeped. Movement. Coming fast. Dozens of Vorex drones poured from openings in the base. They looked almost insect-like, with multiple limbs and no visible eyes. The team opened fire, their new weapons tearing through the first wave. Fall back to position 2. Jason ordered as more drones appeared. The battle was intense but brief. The Human Alliance team moved with precision, covering each other as they retreated strategically to their second position, where they had better cover. Detonate the charges, Jason commanded once everyone was clear. The Vorex base erupted in flames. Black fluid sprayed into the air as the organic structure collapsed in on itself. The remaining drones fell to the ground, twitching and then still. The other teams report similar success, Palmer said, checking his communications device. All 3 bases destroyed. For the first time in 17 years, the Alliance had retaken ground from the Vorex. The soldiers cheered, but Jason remained quiet, thinking about what they had seen. Back on the command ship, Susan Walsh examined the samples they had brought back. Her lab was filled with complex equipment brought from Earth. This confirms my worst fears, she told Jack and Admiral Wright. The Vorex aren't just conquering planets, they're consuming them, converting all organic matter into more Vorex. Like a virus, Jack said quietly. Susan nodded. Exactly like a virus. And these readings suggest they've done this many times before. Admiral Wright stared at the sample with horror. So they won't stop until they've consumed everything in the galaxy. Unless we stop them first, Jack replied. Susan, is there any way to reverse what they've done to Theta 9? Susan hesitated. Maybe. But first, we need to understand how the Vorex work, where they came from. There's something strange in their genetic structure that doesn't make sense, almost like they were designed. Designed. Wright asked sharply. By who? That, said Susan, is what we need to find out. The news of Theta 9's recapture spread quickly through Alliance space. For the first time in years, people celebrated. Hope returned to planets that had known only fear for too long. Scientist Olivia Parker worked day and night in her lab aboard the Dauntless. She was a small woman with tired eyes and hands that never seemed to stop moving. The Vorex samples fascinated and terrified her. Look at this, she said to Susan Walsh as they studied the black material under powerful microscopes. The cellular structure isn't random. See these patterns. They repeat exactly every 7 units. Susan frowned. That doesn't happen in nature. No, Olivia agreed. It doesn't. They took their findings to a meeting with Jack, Admiral Wright, and intelligence agent Frank Williams, a quiet man who had joined the human expedition because of his expertise in ancient languages and cultures. The Vorex were created, Olivia explained simply. They're artificial life forms designed as weapons. The room fell silent. Weapons? Admiral Wright finally asked. Created by whom? Frank cleared his throat. I believe I can answer that. He placed an old data crystal on the table. This contains records from Earth's earliest contact with alien life. The Nephthali who crashed on our planet left behind writings about a war that happened long before they came to Earth. He activated the crystal, projecting images of ancient symbols. They called it the Purification War. A faction of their civilization believed the galaxy needed to be cleansed of impure life forms. They created biological weapons that would consume and convert organic matter. The Vorex, Jack said quietly. Frank nodded. The weapons escaped control. The Nephthali who came to Earth were fleeing from them. Admiral Wright looked troubled. Why didn't you share this information before? Because we weren't certain, Jack replied. These are very old records. We needed confirmation from the Vorex samples. Communications specialist Tim Davis entered the room, his face serious. Captain, we've been working on decoding Vorex transmissions. We found something strange. He set up his equipment quickly. There's a signal pattern that repeats in all Vorex communications. It doesn't originate from their ships or bases. Where does it come from? Asked Jack. Tim pointed to a region of space far beyond Alliance territory. Somewhere out there. It's like a control signal. Olivia's eyes widened. If the Vorex were designed as weapons, they would need controllers. This signal could be directing them. If we disrupt the signal, Susan began. We might be able to stop them without destroying them all. Jack finished. Tim, can you track the signal to its source? Maybe, with help from Alliance communications experts. They know this region of space better than we do. Admiral Wright nodded firmly. You'll have whatever you need. Dennis Cooper had been silent until now, watching from the corner. If this theory is correct, someone has been controlling the Vorex all this time, directing them to attack specific worlds, including ours. Why? Asked Susan. What purpose could this possibly serve? Purification, Frank answered grimly. The Nephthali records spoke of cleansing the galaxy. Perhaps the descendants of those who created the Vorex are still trying to complete their mission. Jack stood up. We need a covert mission to locate this signal source, a small, fast ship that can slip past Vorex territory undetected. I've been working on something that might help, offered Tim. A way to mask our energy signatures to mimic Vorex ships. I'll lead the mission, said Jack. Admiral Wright shook her head. No, we need you coordinating the fleet. If the Vorex realize what we're doing, they'll throw everything they have at us. Jack looked around the room. Special Operations Commander Betty Morgan would be perfect for this. She has experience in stealth missions. I'll go too, Frank said. I can read any ancient Nephthali writing we might find. As they discussed the details, no one noticed the small drone hovering outside the window. On a distant Vorex command ship, the controllers watched and listened, their plans already changing to counter this new threat. Special Operations Commander Betty Morgan inspected the stealth ship Phantom with critical eyes. It was small, built for speed and secrecy rather than combat. Its dark hull absorbed light instead of reflecting it. "She doesn't look like much," Betty said to engineer Kathy Winters, "but I'm guessing appearances are deceiving." Kathy smiled. "The Phantom can slip past any sensor grid in the galaxy. We've installed the signal masking technology Tim developed. To any Vorex scanners, you'll look like one of their scout ships." Betty nodded, satisfied. She was a compact woman with short red hair and quick movements. 20 years of special operations had taught her to trust her instincts, and her instincts told her this mission would be dangerous but necessary. Her team consisted of 5 people. Herself as commander, human tech specialist Gary Patterson, whose fingers moved across keyboards like magic, Alliance navigator Laura Nelson, who knew the star maps better than anyone, Tarjan bioengineer David Scott, an expert on Vorex biology, and Frank Williams, whose knowledge of ancient Nephthali would be crucial. "Remember," Jack told them at the final briefing, "this is reconnaissance only. Locate the signal source, gather information, and return. No heroics." Betty gave him a mock salute. "When have I ever been heroic?" Jack raised an eyebrow. "Do you want the full list or just the highlights?" The Phantom departed quietly, slipping away while the main fleet engaged in a diversionary battle. Using hidden routes provided by Alliance scouts, they bypassed the main Vorex territories. "We're approaching the signal origin," Gary reported on the 5th day. "It's coming from a system with a black hole." Laura studied her star charts. That's the perfect hiding place. The radiation and gravity distortion would mask any transmissions from normal scans. As they drew closer, they saw it, a massive space station orbiting the black hole at a safe distance. Its design was unlike anything they had seen before, elegant, with sweeping curves and towers that reached toward the stars. "Ancient Nephthali architecture," Frank whispered, his eyes wide. "Just like in the Earth records." Betty made her decision. "We need to get aboard that station." Using the Phantom's Vorex signal disguise, they docked at a maintenance port. The team donned special suits designed to protect them from both the station's environment and potential Vorex attacks. "Stay close," Betty ordered as they entered the station. "Gary, keep tracking that signal." The interior was a maze of corridors that seemed to be partly grown rather than built. The walls pulsed with faint light, responding to their presence. "The signal is strongest this way," Gary said, pointing toward the center of the station. As they moved deeper, they found signs of habitation. Living quarters, workstations, research labs. But something was wrong. "These are designed for Nephthali," David noted, examining a control panel. "But they've been modified for Vorex use." Finally, they reached a massive central chamber. Inside, they found their answer. 7 Nephthali worked at control stations surrounding the glowing core. They wore strange robes covered with symbols matching those in Frank's ancient records. "The purifiers," Frank breathed. "They survived." Betty signaled the team to remain hidden as they watched. The Nephthali were sending commands through the core, which amplified them into the powerful signal directing Vorex throughout the galaxy. "We need to disable that core," Betty whispered. Suddenly, an alarm blared. One of the Nephthali pointed at a screen showing the Phantom docked at the maintenance port. "Intruders," the Nephthali shouted. "Protect the sacred mission." Black liquid began pouring from vents in the ceiling, quickly forming into Vorex drones. "So much for reconnaissance," Betty muttered, drawing her weapon. "Gary, David, get to that core and find a way to shut it down. Laura, Frank, with me. We'll keep them busy." The chamber erupted in chaos as the team fought their way toward the core. Betty's team held off the Vorex while Gary and David reached the control systems. "I can disrupt the signal," Gary shouted over the noise, "but it will overload the core." "Do it," Betty ordered, firing at another wave of Vorex. Gary's fingers flew across the alien controls. The core began to pulse erratically, its light changing from steady blue to angry red. "We need to go now," David yelled as the station began to shake. "This whole place is going to collapse." The Phantom raced away from the collapsing station, damaged but still flying. Inside, Gary Patterson and Laura Nelson were the only survivors. Betty, Frank, and David had stayed behind to hold off the Vorax and ensure the core overloaded. "Signal disruption confirmed," Gary said quietly, his face streaked with tears. "Betty did it. The control signal is gone." Laura nodded, piloting the ship with steady hands despite her grief. "We need to get back and tell them." 3 days later, the Phantom limped back to Alliance space. Jack Miller and Admiral Wright listened in silence as Gary and Laura reported what had happened. "The Purifiers believed they were fulfilling their ancestors' mission," Gary explained. "They saw all non-Nephthali life as impure. The Vorax were their tool to cleanse the galaxy." "And now?" Admiral Wright asked. "Without the control signal, the Vorax forces are in chaos," Laura replied. "Our long-range scans show them fighting each other as often as they attack our ships." Reports came in from across the galaxy. The Vorax threat was not gone, but it had changed. Without central direction, the Vorax had become isolated groups, dangerous but no longer a unified force capable of overwhelming the Alliance. 1 month later, a ceremony was held on the Alliance Central Station. Human and Alliance leaders gathered to honor the fallen and plan for the future. Jack stood before the assembled crowd. "We've won a great victory, but our work isn't done. The Vorax still exist, and without control, they're unpredictable. We need to contain them and find a way to undo the damage they've caused." Grand Minister Peter Clark nodded. "The question is, what comes next? The Alliance has relied on human military strength. Will Earth continue to stand with us now that the main threat is gone?" Jack smiled. "We came here to help distant cousins in trouble. We found friends and allies instead." He activated a hologram showing Earth ships working with Alliance vessels to rebuild Theta 9. Earth has developed terraforming technology that can heal planets damaged by the Vorax. We offer this freely to the Alliance. Admiral Wright stepped forward. "The Gardanian Alliance Council has voted. We propose a new organization, the Galactic Cooperative. Not just a military alliance, but a true partnership between our peoples." The crowd applauded. The new future seemed bright, but not everyone was celebrating. In a quiet corner, Dennis Cooper spoke with Olivia Parker. "There are still Vorax out there. Some Nephthali may have escaped the station, and we don't know if Earth will be content to be equal partners forever." Olivia looked thoughtful. "We've studied the Vorax biology extensively now. We think we can undo their programming. Help them develop individual consciousness instead of a destructive hive mind." "You want to save them?" Cooper asked, surprised. "They were weapons, not naturally evil," Olivia explained. "Like any technology, they can be reprogrammed." Meanwhile, Gary Patterson had joined a team working with Vorax prisoners. He wanted to honor Betty's sacrifice by finding a peaceful solution. "I'm detecting brain activity patterns we've never seen before," he told Susan Walsh as they monitored a contained Vorax drone. "Without the control signal, they're developing new neural pathways. They're evolving," Susan realized, "becoming something new." On the observation deck, Jack stood with Admiral Wright, watching Earth and Alliance ships working together. "When we broke through the radiation belt and heard your distress signals, we didn't know what we'd find," Jack said. "We certainly didn't expect to discover a 17-year war and artificial life forms created by ancient zealots." Admiral Wright smiled slightly. "And we didn't expect to be saved by a legend." "Not saved," Jack corrected. "Helped. You fought for 17 years before we arrived. That kind of determination deserves respect." A young Illyrian child approached them, offering 2 cups of celebration drink. Jack accepted his with a smile, thinking of how far they had come and the long, hopeful road ahead. "To the future," Admiral Wright said, raising her cup. "To the cooperative," Jack agreed, raising his. Above them, The stars shone brightly on worlds that, for the first time in 17 years, knew peace.